Hey everybody, it's Sean, Bulle the kid. It's early morning. Got my low voice, I got my wrinkly eyes, got my hat on. You know what this hat means? This hat means that anytime you see a thumbnail and I'm wearing this, it means we're going to talk about treasure, adventure. So, got my mug Sabrina gave me. Now, what I'm going to talk about is probably the most requested story. I get people bugging me to take them to where this thing is at. Now, I've actually looked for it a couple times since, but it is so intriguing that it drives people crazy. So for my buddies that really wanted to go with me on this, sorry, I'm going to put this story out because it's pretty weird, pretty cool. And I also woke up and thought, I think I'm going to quit doing a bunch of videos on my loss, all that depressing stuff. I mean, if you want to see that, you can see my videos. But other than that, I think I need to start talking about some fun stuff. Now, the other day I was down in Prescott, Arizona. I live in Arizona. And I don't know why, my transmission was having issues, so I was waiting for my truck, and I was just meandering all around the creeks down there, and I saw a shiny rock, and I picked it up, and this doggone thing says Harmony on it. Who leaves that stuff out there? Never picked up a rock with a word on it before. All right, so let's get to the story. Now, some of you know, when I got out of the Army, I went back to my hometown of Silver City, New Mexico. And at first, I moved in with my parents. I had this massive crate shipped by the Army to my parents' place, but I found out right away that even though you're in the Army and you come back kind of as a man, sometimes your dad treats you a little bit like a kid still. So I ended up moving out. My friend Mauro came over. We just loaded all my stuff. I think I lasted there 3 days. Doesn't mean I don't like them. It just means I needed to go. So I wasn't sure where I was going to go. And somehow I happened to be talking to some friends of mine, I called her Miss Mathis. I was very proper. Lona Mae Mathis, she lived down in the central part of Silver City in a humongous house, and I had worked for them before, and she said, why don't you move in here? So I ended up moving in with Bob and Lona Mae Mathis. They owned Mathis and Mathis Mining Company, and Bob was an old geologist. He had a lot of mining claims all throughout southwest New Mexico, Texas, and Arizona. And so Miss Mathis, she at first put me in a bedroom upstairs, and then she realized maybe there's more of an appropriate place where I can have privacy. And it just so happened in their basement, there was a kind of a big room there. And a long time ago, their son, Bobby, he was really into music and recording and all that. He made a recording studio downstairs. So he had left for Burbank years ago, and she said, you can live in the recording studio. So I'll tell you guys, that was one of the coolest bedrooms you could ever have. I mean, I had walls filled with angled boards and sand, and the door was really heavy, and there was all this colored lighting, and there was a drum room. man, it was awesome. But you know, the only side note on that is when they did dig that area out, they removed 3 skeletons. So I was sleeping in an kind of downstairs where 3 skeletons were laying for who knows how long. But anyway, Bob had me, for the most part, doing what's called assessment work on some of his mining claims. He had some placer claims, which are not hard rock gold. Hard rock gold is when you're in the mountains and you're peeling the gold out of the rock, but placer claims are where the gold washes down into the valley. And so he had me do the annual assessment work on a lot of his placer claims, mostly over just north of Tucson in an area known as Catalina Mountains, between Catalina and Florence. And so now Bob started using me to go with him on these prospecting trips. Now, I made a video about that before, about one time I didn't know it was in my backpack. But a lot of times on the prospecting trips, we were over in Mogollon, New Mexico area. And there was one time we were in this really old building. It was really deteriorating. He actually didn't go in. He wasn't interested in that because him and Lona May, they lived in a little house in Mogollon back when it was still in operation, and that was the 1930s. And I went in their house, and their shoes were still there, and they're all curled up in the corner. But Bob used to let me go metal detecting sometimes when he wanted to sit down and rest. I always brought my metal detector with. But I was crawling around under a building and came across this stuff. I mean, I'll tell you what, if I didn't pull that stuff out of there way back then, it would have been deteriorated. But this is an old payroll. Got to open it carefully here. It's really old. But this is an old payroll, and says May 1909. Has a list of all the workers. Not all the workers, but this is just one page. And there's a name down here. You know, that really caught my attention. And where is it? Here it is. So there's a man named T.J. Lockwood, and it says he's a cook. And right at the end here it says suicide via cyanide. Pay Mrs. Lockwood. And it shows how much he made for that month. So this is 1 month of pay for all of these people. Some of them were laborers, some were managers. It's got all the names here. Now, I did make an effort. I looked on Ancestry.com and I searched for any relatives of Mr. Lockwood. Apparently his lineage just died with him. I did find a sort of a relative, and they had absolutely no interest in having this. So I'm just going to hang on to it for right now. I mean, it's probably not the only one that exists. And then another thing that I found was this invoice for fuel oil. And it says Silver City, New Mexico, Mogollon, New Mexico. And this is the Black Hawk Mines. And what's interesting to me is they this is fuel oil in those big barrels, those drums, and it says here it's $1.15 per barrel. So this is This invoice came from 1937, so it's much more modern than that payroll. But anyway, now let's get to the real story, the real reason you guys are here. Now, we took a lot of trips over in that area, and sometimes we veered way off of the beaten path, but Bob was only interested in the gold. And so he had me carry a backpack. I had a rock hammer, and I carried all these white bags, and he would point, and I would take samples, and I'd put them in the bag. And by the time I got done collecting samples, my stupid backpack would weigh, you can imagine I'm carrying like tons of rocks in my backpack. But there was one trip, and I'll tell you what, it's kind of been a mystery to me as to where exactly we went. But I'm telling you guys, it got so usual for me to go with him places that we were going up and down canyons and through trees and everything. And I know we were over in that area. And one day we were back. I think it was toward the end of the day. We had walked a long way. And we were on top of a ridge. And it was just sheer cliffs going down. And Bob didn't have a way to get down. I was much more of a rock climber. I could do that stuff. I had to lower the backpack down when I did stuff like that. I couldn't climb down that stuff with a backpack full of rocks. So Bob told me he'll find another way around if I want to go ahead and go down the cliff, because he thought if I see a certain thing when I'm going down, to take a sample. So he left. He's a 70-some-year-old guy. He just headed that way. So I was going down this cliff, and I noticed the cliff was split. And when I say split, I mean here's the top, and then there's split where you could go down this cliff and you were on another ledge. And when you're on this ledge, then you got to go down another cliff. So it was a double cliff. They were staggered like this. So I made my way down this cliff through this crevice, and I was holding both sides of the wall. And I made it down onto this ledge. And why I chose this way to go down, I don't know. I thought I was invincible. But I got on this ledge, and what was weird, it was only about maybe 10 feet. It was only about 10 feet of ground you can stand on before it's another sheer cliff, and that cliff went down a long ways. So I was somewhere up there, and there were these aspen trees and juniper trees and all these things that had taken root on that ledge, and they grew up, and they actually made an entire, almost like a hidden area. And so if you can imagine, there's a sheer cliff, and then there's all these trees growing, and they appear like they're growing on the cliff, but it's just a little ledge. So I thought, this is pretty cool. So I took and went behind some of the trees. Some of the trees made this one area really hidden. And I was walking on this ledge behind these trees, and there's a cliff face on the side of me. And I saw something really unexpected. There was a really old wooden door in the cliff. And I thought, this is really weird. So I went over to this door, and if I were to guesstimate the age of the door, or, the era, it'd probably be late 1800s, early 1900s. Nothing more modern than that. And it had square nails holding it together. And so when I went to push on this door, I couldn't get it to go the one way. So when I tried to pull it out and it wouldn't come out. It would only swing in. And when I was swinging this door in, it pushed a pile of dirt. So this door has not been opened in a very long time. So I kind of pushed the door open, and there's a tunnel going into the cliff. And I didn't have a flashlight at the time because I think this was a day trip and we just didn't pack a flashlight. Why'd we need a flashlight? But I let a little bit of sunlight come in. The trees were blocking a lot of this thing. And right inside, there was a bed. And I mean, it was a really old bed. And it still had some really thin, deteriorating linens laying on it. It was one of them really old spring beds where they had the springs everywhere. And there was this super old lantern hanging right on the side of the cliff in there. One of the oldest ones I've seen. And there was a canteen in there that I didn't know it was a canteen at the time. I didn't know what really old canteens look like, but it was really, really old. And there was some stuff into the darkness and I could not see. So I made a mental note. I'm going to come back here and I'm going to figure out what this is and what's going on here. And somebody was living in this thing for some reason. And it was a long, long time ago. So, I don't know. I had a lot of theories in my head. Some can be as simple as they were just living in there, but I don't know why anybody would live in that unless there was gold. I mean, that's the only thing I can think of is it's all about the gold. Now, the question is, where'd the person go? Is the person still in there? Did they have a stash? That drove me crazy. I thought, what if something happened to them and they just had a stash of gold back in there somewhere, or even nearby under some rocks? So for years, I thought about that, and I told a few friends, and everybody I told that story to, they're just like ready to drop everything and let's get going. Let's go find that door. Well, over the years, I've looked for that door for, I would say I went about 3 times because I had way too many other expeditions I was on, especially that Lost Adams diggings. All those trips we did up into the wilderness, outside of, it was like between Silver City and Truth or Consequences up in that mountain range area, the Black Range. So I was so tied up with that and so worn out from that I really didn't get to go back. And plus, you don't really know what's in the door. But everybody I've talked to, I think this story drives them crazy because it's such a mystery what's in there. You know, I'll tell you, I told you what I saw in there, but I don't know what I couldn't see in there. So anyway, that is pretty cool. And if any of you guys know any of the Lockwoods that had a relative in worked the mine in Mogollon, let me know. Otherwise, I'll just hang on to that thing. I think the thing is like 110 years old now. It's a pretty cool piece of paper. It's super thick. All right, well, I hope you guys really enjoyed that story. I have a lot more to come besides that. So, and the series I'm going to do on our search for the Lost Adams diggings and all the things we found and all the things even I discovered, That one's going to maybe take about 4 videos. It'll have part 1 through 4. I'm trying to be a lot more careful about that one because I don't want to get events in front of the other. Sometimes I ramble on in some tangent, and I want to make sure I start from the beginning and really give people a sense of how that whole thing evolved and how crazy weird that got. And I will tell you this, guys, and this is something I'm not sure I should say, but yes, there is gold. So, all right. Catch you guys later. Bye.
Bulle, the kid.